a sister, aunt,
friend,
writer, photographer, academic pioneer, professor, lifelong learner, colleague, mentor, traveler.
a unique woman, woman.
Wow, she was really...
Come here, want to try another one?
Okay. I think we were supposed to stay with the uniqueness for a while. A bright woman, a treasure. We invite all who are gathered here at Meadowwood, where she was just beginning to enjoy this home she was creating here. Thrilled at the sight of a bunny outside. And knowing her photography skills would find a new landscape and focus around the area. We gather to seek comfort in one another's presence as we each in our own way begin to bid one we knew and loved farewell and adieu. And I just want to thank with gratitude for Beth. Our opening words.
This is a poem called Ithaca. Bev came to her first Women Writing for a Change circle about 7 years ago. And very quickly, I was the facilitator at that time. My name's Bev Lodge Regal. And very quickly, it was clear that Bev had traveled the world. And so this is a poem that came to me in honor of Bev. Ithaca. When you set out for Ithaca, ask that your way be long, full of adventure, full of instruction. The Lystrogonians and the Cyclops, angry Poseidon, do not fear them. Such as these you will never find, as long as your thought is lofty, as long as a rare emotion touch your spirit and your body. The Lystrogonians and the Cyclops, angry Poseidon, you will not meet them unless you carry them in your soul, unless your soul raise them up before you. Ask that your way be long, at many a summer dawn to enter with what gratitude, what joy, ports seen for the first time, to stop at Phoenician trading centers and to buy good merchandise, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony, and sensuous perfumes of every kind, sensuous perfumes as lavishly as you can, to visit many Egyptian cities, to gather stores of knowledge from the learned. Have Ithaca always in your mind. Your arrival there is what you are destined for. But don't in the least hurry the journey. Better it last for years, so that when you reach the island, you are old, rich with all you have gained on the way, not expecting Ithaca to give you wealth. Ithaca gave you a splendid journey. Without her, you would not have set out. She hasn't anything else to give you. And if you find her poor, Ithaca hasn't deceived you. So wise you have become of such experience that already you'll have understood what all these Ithacas mean. I'm going to bring a chunk for Bev.
At this time, I'm going to invite forward dear family members of Bev. Her sister, Pam Slattery Thomas, her husband, David Thomas, their son, Patrick, and also the spirit of Pandora with you, the family, right? So I ask you to come forward to light this flame. We kindle this flame in memory of Bev and in celebration of her life. In this flame, we recognize this as a time of sorrow as well as heartfelt remembrance. And in this flame, we search for consolation in the loss. Pam kindles this sign of our hopeful quest for love and acceptance. Thank you. Again, here we are this afternoon. We're here to affirm the wisdom which holds each of us within what is sacred in each of our hearts, within our own life beliefs, but that which is sacred to each of you. We gather to affirm that wisdom as a whole. When a beloved person dies, family and friends gather for many reasons. Life has touched us with deep grief, and we need one another's company for warmth and reassurance. Just to be together, to look into one another's faces. I saw this as people were coming in. See the common expression of hurt helps alleviate the loneliness of those feelings we have. And so we draw our hearts together with one another for comfort. And understand we are here to say yes to life's greatest expression, and that is love. Even in the midst of loss, that love never ends. And there was much love about Bev, the way she lived her life. Brightness is what comes to my mind. Yes, partly because there were 3 Fulbrights, I know. Poland, Nepal. But I experienced a woman with an exquisite curiosity, a command of language, one might call colorful at times, and a sparkle in her eye when something comical had occurred. And of course, brightness knows darkness. And sometimes our lives wax and wane within the joys and sorrows, within the contentment and depression, within the confusion and clarity of life's gifts and challenges, and Bev was no exception. I know from what I've heard from some of you that she would not want us to wallow in our sadness. But this I want to say, in order to celebrate Bev's life, we have to name the loss. We barely had time to take in Bev's diagnosis of cancer before she died. The outpouring of grief on Facebook, between family, friends, amongst colleagues, students, and so many more, it has been palpable. Our grief simply reflects the love in our heart. Our sorrow reflects that place of joy where Bev found to reside in our hearts. So at this time, we simply name that. We name that we have not had the usual time of reckoning with death's call. For many of us, it's hard to believe we're not going to see Bev walking on this earthly plane again with her camera in hand. So I invite you to rely, to lean into memories that you have of Bev, the love, as a way to honor your own heart, her life, and this loss, this bright life, this Dr. Beverly Ann Slattery, Hartford. So take a deep breath. Arrive into your inner sanctuary, your inner place within. What you're going to hear is a musical interlude. It is one that Bev would know quite well. It's one that we often share at Women Writing for Change. And it's a place simply to be together as this group, to be with your own memories of Bev, to be holding the joy and sorrow of this time. It will be about 5 minutes, so simply allow your breath to deepen your experience of the music. The music is by Deva Premal.
can't do this without bringing Bev's voice into the room. And we're so lucky that we have lots of her writing that she was already sharing with the world, and she would be okay, I think, with us sharing this morning or this afternoon. I'm going to read an excerpt from a longer poem that Bev wrote. With thanks to Kelly Sage, I just need to name Kelly. She's our Wednesday night facilitator and has been a dear friend and companion through this entire process. And she just couldn't be here today, and she's sad about that. But she collected some of these writings. So this is from Bev, An Old Woman's Random Memories, a free verse poem. And this is excerpted. I remember snowbanks tunneled into forts against the great winter enemy, the boy next door. I remember being lifted up to be shown the empty crib, the quietness where the baby used to be. I remember my grandmother's aproned lap, soft home of fairy tales and stories read aloud. I remember riding in the truck on the milk route with my uncle, the empty bottles rattling against each other in their wire cages, chattering about the homes they'd just left, telling those stories to be held for their new adventures in the next homes, where they would be delivered. I remember taking sandwiches to white helmeted men standing watch for the raging forest fires that were choking up our skies as we held our breath and crossed our fingers that they would pass us by. I remember crouching under our desks at school, hands over our heads, practicing for the evil day when the red menace would bomb us to oblivion. We, even in our youth, couldn't understand how those desks would protect us. I remember getting the first polio shots, a newly made vaccine lined up in the school corridor with others, waiting nervously for our turn to be stuck, and recalling stories of those we knew who had been struck and crippled. And yet we were still a bit afraid of that needle in our arms. I remember running naked from the car in the crisp air of the western desert night to plunge into the steaming hot spring and to float, body warm, face cold, looking at the bits of glistening stars in the black sky. I remember making a story of high-powered towers being aliens moving slowly across our North American continent at a pace we could not see with our human eyes, but knowing that sometime, the wire aliens would be our masters. I remember falling down the dark opening at the inn of Delica after 2 long days of trekking and wondering if I were dead. I remember the young Polish musician on the train to Lodz, urging me to run away with him and join the circus. Too many more memories from my 74 years. The rest will have to wait for the next poem, and the poem after that, and the poems that follow those. Thank you, Bev. We're going to be joined by some colleagues, friends from the Women Writing for a Change community to offer some remembrances of Bev right now. And everyone's already promised, we hope, to keep our offerings relatively short, as hard as that is. So, am I right in doing this, Marianne? I didn't bring my... Yes. So what I'd like to invite us all to do, those of you will just come forward according to our list here in the program. And after each person shares, In the tradition of our Women Writing for a Change community, we bring a chime after each person speaks, just as a response, and to kind of hold those words in the air among us until the next person will come up to share. So please do say your name and share what you've brought to share with us today. And let's bring Marlon forward.
That was, how do I, it's Hassan? Okay. That was a professor when I first came here and started the degree program. And I have two anecdotes about her. One was while we were in class, I think it was while the class was going on, we were in the old School of Ed, it's our hall now, and another professor came to the door and said, I have this room. And Ben went over to the door and talked to him and said, no. And he said, well, I reserved this. She says, well, I reserved this, and we're having our class. And he said, you're too short to be a professor. She must have gone ballistic. That was the times. And the other one was we went to a conference in Malaysia, Beverly and Harry Grandman and I. And when we flew over, we all flew together. And Harry, of course, was in first class. I was in business, because I had miles. And Beverly was in coach. And Harry would come back at mealtime and say hi to Beverly and look down at her little tray and say, oh, that looks nice. And then he'd go, oh, time for champagne and caviar. And that was how we traveled. I mean, I don't want to say much more except that, you know, as I had gone through these last 2 weeks with her in this final ending, as I realized Beverly was genuine and Beverly was real. And you don't see that in everybody, and I certainly don't claim it myself. But she was true. And she was the kind of friend that you just knew. For the last few years, I hadn't seen much of her, but I knew she was really active in the writing group and the photography group. I thought, well, she's okay. And then when she moved in here, and Kathy Norris, who's the salesperson here, told me, she says, oh, you're getting a friend moving in. And she said, Barbara something, H, Hart something. I said, you don't mean Beverly Hartford, do you? And she said, oh, that's the name. So Bev was really happy here, moving. And we ate together in the dining room, and we laughed a lot. We laughed a lot at each other and friends and situations, and it was good. And now it's Kathleen.
Beverly Ann Slattery Hartford, Professor Emerita, Scholar, Teacher, Co-author, Colleague, Mentor, Fellow Traveler, Friend, Sister, Writer, Poet, Photographer. Over the years, we gave 25 talks together, but this is the one talk I never wanted to give. Many of you have known Beverly in more than one role and have benefited and gained from knowing her. Bev was funny, had a dry wit, and a generous spirit. We taught together many times, being allowed the privilege of team teaching. Bev was a superb teacher. She shared her range and depth of knowledge when she taught, and I always learned something, both about the content and about teaching on those days when she was in charge of the class. She taught me how to be a woman faculty member at IU, back when women were given free memberships to the Faculty Wives Club, so that we would have female friends to play with. Because, of course, it was unthinkable that we would associate with men. with her own international bohemian style, the flowing skirts, the soft jackets, the exotic necklaces, the dangling earrings, and above all, the stacked bangles that jingled and chimed. She gradually showed me that being taken seriously did not mean wearing a suit. The women students loved her clothes and watched for the next outfit. And they even wrote this on the course evaluation. I'm not sure, read my man. But you know about her style. What she probably did not tell you was that she was famous. Well, famous in the way that academics are famous. Her work is in textbooks and is an obligatory citation. She wrote approximately 40 published papers alone and with others, co-edited and authored 4 books and 1 special journal issue, and was co-principal investigator of a Spencer grant, as well as a 3-time Fulbright scholar. Recently, I discovered that Beverly Hartford has an alter ego. In Asia, many references to her work appear as Beverly Hartfold with an L. We worked together at the beginning of a field known as interlanguage pragmatics, and we had quite some success at it. We wrote together for years. We would sit for hours reading our data. We worked on talk, that is, how regular people come to know the rules of social and academic talk within their communities, whether it's their home community or an adopted community. And then we would speak out loud our story, and then the stories that we saw in the transcripts, and then we would write together. Writing with another person is an intimate act. Our sentences intertwining, finishing what the other person started, completely exposed, moving, cutting, adding. We were braver together than either one of us would have been alone. We wrote our way into the foundation of a new field with 15 papers, and we talked our way around the world, beginning with our annual pilgrimage to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and on to Texas, and California, and Massachusetts, and then Hong Kong, and Greece, and Finland. And when we set out to Greece in 1990, to a meeting of the International Association for Applied Linguistics, Harry Gradman, whom Marlon mentioned, our chair, gave us first-class upgrades from his personal stash. The steward took our paper tickets, remember those? Our paper tickets as we boarded the plane, and he looked at them this way, and he looked at them this way, and he looked at us, and he looked at the tickets, and we cleaned up pretty well. I mean, we were wearing cotton knit dresses that were the style of the time, and we had new backpacks for the trip to Greece. I had no idea what was going on, and Bev said to him, "Those are first-class tickets." And the steward stood aside and said, "Seats 3A and 3B. We traveled to Hong Kong several times to give talks. We often stayed on one side of the harbor and took a ferry to the other side, to the university. The only problem is that I get horribly seasick. After the first day, an IU grad student met us at the hotel and told us how to take the metro under the harbor to the other side. Bev did not like the idea of being under the water in a subway, but her sympathy for me overrode her fear, and she took the subway with me for the first time across Hong Kong and under the harbor to make sure that I knew how to find my way and that I knew how to find my way back. And after that, I was on my own, which is fair enough. Grateful to know how to find my way and to never have to get on that ferry again. On one visit to Hong Kong, Bev surprised herself by bargaining accidentally. We were shopping at a modern, local women's clothing store specializing in silk, the type with bright lights and a computer register and accepted credit cards. So when she stepped up to pay, the clerk said the total. Of course, we were joking around, and Bev didn't hear her, so she said, "How much?" And then the clerk took a fair amount off the tab, and Bev was delighted and also shocked, somewhat embarrassed that she had bargained the price without meaning to. She didn't like to bargain, and she thought she was bad at it, and the signals were all wrong as far as we were concerned for bargaining. But what did we know? Bev and I were a good match. She was understated, starting a negative answer with, "It wouldn't be my first choice," and escalating to no if you really pushed her. I generally start with no, and then escalate to no way, with a couple of fillers in between, which I cannot say in polite company. We balanced each other out. Bev liked to send me funny cards, especially old pictures of old women, and she would circle them and label them with our names. And she told me about dreams that she had where one of us was in a wheelchair and one in a walker, and we were still giving pragmatics talks. We didn't quite make that, but we had a great run. To sum up, here are a few things that I have learned from my time with Beverly. We are all braver together than we are alone. Compassion overrides fear. We are responsible for each other and for welcoming and mentoring newcomers wherever and whomever they may be. And finally, writing with another person is an act of love and trust.